but we are now recording. So I just wanted to say hello again and welcome to everybody on this call. Before we get into things here, just sort of a personal introductory note. I'm coming to you live from South by Southwest, where I've sequestered myself into what I believe is the corner of the Hilton in Austin. But if there's a little bit of distracting foot traffic and voices in the background, that's why I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum for everybody's benefit here. But I'm hoping that once we get into the questions, and in particular the live Q&A from the community, I'll be talking a little bit less. On a personal note, I think it's fun to remember that the first time we tried doing any one of these events, where we were doing this live question and answer process, was actually last year's South by Southwest. I had been participating in that one too. It was much shorter. We were only doing like 15 minutes at a time, and it was a little bit vlogier style, as opposed to this much more in-depth question and answer period that we do now via Zoom. So just an interesting bit of food for thought about how things have changed and evolved over the past year. Hopefully this is a more engaging format for you, members of our community, but of course, we're always welcome to feedback and looking to continue to improve and change over the next year. But so let's get to the main event of what we're actually going to be discussing here today, and that is the technology that's being employed by Breaker. And so we're being joined by a couple of gentlemen on this call today, really, really brilliant guys who are part of the Breaker team. We've got Milad Mostavi, who's been with Breaker from the very beginning, back when we were Singular DTV. He's been one of the incredible architects behind everything from the singles token code to the Breaker DApp as it's been released. So Milad has a unique vantage point from sort of every single technological implementation by Breaker. And so it'll be great for you guys to be able to talk to him a little bit more directly, since last time you only heard from him quite briefly. We're also joined by Adam Lesh, who's a little bit newer to the Breaker team, though certainly no less impressive. Adam's our VP of technology. He comes from a long background in the entertainment industry specifically. He's really an expert pertaining to content management and supply chain management in the entertainment space. So he can also give you his sort of very nuanced view about what Breaker's doing in these regards and why it's a little bit different than traditional solutions. So we're going to dig in with some questions that we were asked a while ago first, since they've been on hold, and I want to make sure that we give them their due. But why don't we start with you, Adam? So content storage on the Breaker platform, how does it work? Can you explain it to us?
Sure. So we upload files to cloud seeders, which are then distributed via peer-to-peer network, torrent-style peer-to-peer network, throughout the, which go directly to purchasers. Obviously, when the first purchase happens, it comes from the seeders. After that, it can come from the network, depending on what's closest. So that's the sort of basic process by which files are distributed to the network.
Cool. Anything you want to add there, Milad, or we're good?
No, we're good. I mean, we use a lot of BitTorrent technology. We rely on it a lot, and to have more availability and speed, we do host our own nodes. And yeah, as Adam said, those are the first nodes that get the files and host it on behalf.
We should mention it's a closed network. It's entirely within our own network, and we don't piggyback on anybody else's network. So all content is secure within that network.
Yeah, it's our own network. Awesome. Well, on the subject,
can I ask a question on that note?
Sure.
So when you said you don't piggyback on someone's network, I remember like downloading a file, and then there was this section that indicated kilobytes of update or uploading. So then doesn't that mean that it's doesn't that then mean that it's also running off of my network? Or what do you mean by internal? Because it seems like to me when I upload that data.
Yeah, you're part of a network when you download and keep a file, and even while it's downloading, you are contributing to the network. What Adam meant is that we're not using, open BitTorrent DHT networks, right? The difference is that the files, when they're being sent to you, they're encrypted. So even if someone gets it from you, they can't do anything with it. Yeah, we can go into more detail afterwards, and I can explain how the encryption works and why it's very, very secure, and why we don't use IPFS, because that's a question everyone asks all the time. Why we don't use IPFS?
Cool. Well, something that was touched upon there was this notion of security. We talked about it just now as it pertains to content, but we also had gotten a couple of questions from Urius, aka formerly the Joker, who is asking about security as it pertains to the app itself. And so one of the questions he had asked, I think Milad, probably you're best suited to answer this one. So how does a newbie verify that the site that they're downloading it from isn't hacked? Is there added security to ensure that what users are downloading is the correct version?
Yeah, so the website itself can be verified by checking the SSL certificate, the HTTPS protocol. And the app binaries are always hosted on our GitHub, and no one has access to publish them. But yeah, this is a good question. In the future, we could put the checksum of the binaries on the Ethereum network so people can check, but that's not the new way thing, right? The newbies can just check the HTTPS and the certificate. That's the best way to do it, yeah. Same with other applications like the Ethereum Foundation's wallet, My Crypto, yeah. Although we don't actually, this is not a wallet product, right? You're not going to store tons of Ether on it, but still, yeah, it's still secure. We don't touch the wallets. We don't do anything with it. Everything is local for the user.
And so there was another part to his question that I wanted to ask as well. So what about security once the app is downloaded? How secure are transaction keys on that system? Has the team thought about adding something like scatter to make it easier for users who want to use crypto to pay for items without always having to enter their private?
So they're not actually entering their private key every time. We use ETH Lite wallet like we use with other. Since our 2016 token ETH wallet. And with Lite wallet, you can create it on Token and then add it to your application, right? And then it's there until you delete it. Either delete it or delete the application. And when you want to make a transaction, you actually enter the password that encrypted that Lite wallet, and then it can send the transaction. We never touch the wallet. Everything is local to the user. Yeah, so it's very secure. In the future, we have plans to add other key stores like Get JSON key store, Uport, MetaMask, these kind of key stores are in plan. Yeah, but for now, yeah, Lite wallet is the way to do it.
Great. So we also have gotten some questions about scalability in the past from the very same Urius, aka formerly the Joker. He asked a lot about technology, so I think we'll be hearing a lot of his questions today. We had somewhat answered one of his questions on a previous call. I think it was you who talked about it, Milad. But he actually meant something slightly different. So there was two components to his scalability question. The first one was about payments and gas fees to the Ethereum network. It looks like we're managing that initially by batching transactions, but his second question was more about the network transaction speeds of Ethereum itself. Is that something that you see as limiting or concerning for our particular application, Milad?
So right now we have two payment methods. One is using Ether, that is completely on chain, and that can be affected by the Ethereum scalability. The other is credit cards, and for that, it's kind of a trust minimized solution. The money periodically is exchanged to Ether, and then that Ether is batched into the content addresses. So the content can have multiple addresses, but yeah, that's another topic we can get into. But yeah, I mean, on-chain scalability is a problem if everyone is going to use Ether. But we have plans to go to sidechains like XDAI, which are doing amazing stuff. And there are others that are working on this scalability solution too, like Ethereum Foundation, Polkadot, Plasma, yeah, everyone. So yeah, we're in the same boat with everyone else. We are doing as much as possible off-chain and doing batch transactions on-chain, but at some point it could be a problem. But bright people are working on this, so yeah.
Right, it's not necessarily us all alone that need to build all this thing. We can leverage a lot of the great work that other folks in the Ethereum community are developing.
Exactly.
I guess something maybe slightly different than blockchain specific scalability, scalability of the app more broadly. We got a question: what is the general testing underway for understanding scalability of the solution built? What have the results shown thus far in key performance metrics that the team is investigating concerning this topic of scalability?
Yeah, so the most important scalability issue for now for us is the file distribution itself, right? These big files getting to the users fast without us having a lot of cloud-based servers that will cost a lot and will make the profits smaller, right? So that's the reason we actually use the BitTorrent technology to make the users, others that are running the app, contribute to the network. And BitTorrent is one of the most reliable and one of the oldest decentralized technologies, and it's doing great in my opinion. So that in that end we're okay. Yeah. An example is if a content gets a lot of attention from the users, right? And there's a huge spike in traffic. If, for example, I'm just saying, if you have like 10 seeders around the world, in a normal setup, 10 seeders wouldn't be able to, for example, service 100,000 people, right? But in our setup, because it's a mesh network of torrent nodes, it can be done without any problem. So everyone just gives others the chunks that they have, and yeah, that's how we tackle that. Go ahead, Aneil.
Can I ask a quick question just to follow up on that, Milad? Yeah. So then, if we move away from the desktop, the downloading aspect of what we currently have, into more online streaming, now you don't have the files residing in any nodes, and it has to come from somewhere central. So how are you thinking about solving that problem? Because I mean, that's obviously the best way to consume this, right?
The main difference. I mean, that's one of our topics that we discuss internally a lot. The main difference between streaming and downloading is that when you download, you keep the file, right? But when you stream, you take the chunks of it and you usually keep some of it, and then afterwards you just delete it, right? It's the same process, but the keeping of it is the problem. So on mobile, for example, we won't be able to do uploads from the app itself. I mean, we are able, but it's gonna destroy the internet, the mobile internet of the user. So it's a no-go. And to that end, the more mobile users we have versus desktop users, the more seeders we need to keep in the cloud, until we come up with other solutions that incentivizes node keepers or third-party service providers to help artists seed their file. But yeah, that's the case. So the more mobile users versus the desktop users, the more we need to subsidize on the seeder part. Either us or the artist. It depends. In a decentralized world, it will be the artist that do that. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing some nodding, so that's good. Thanks for the question, Aneil. I think so. Let's see. Another question: how are upgrades handled? So how are upgrades of the Breaker DApp handled?
Yeah, so there are some different lessons. Right now, it's a hybrid app, right? It's not completely decentralized. We have some smart contracts. Those can be upgraded, and the new addresses can be put in the application itself, the binaries. And the binaries themselves are updated through our GitHub page. So new binaries are published, very similar to how Ethereum Foundation's wallet is upgraded. It's almost the same. So new binaries are released. The app itself sees those new binaries released and downloads them. And the website as well sees those new binaries and links to them. That's how they're published. And they're signed by our own keys. So the app knows that it's a valid binary. Also, the GitHub page is only we have access to publish on it. Yeah.
Can I ask one question on this as well?
Yeah.
So I've been, so I have, I've been playing around with this, and I see that every time you pushed these updates, the wallet that I had stored gets wiped out, and I have to re-upload it every time. So is this by design, or is this just part of the beta version, and we're going to be optimizing on this?
I think that's the bug you're encountering. We will look into it.
Really?
But I haven't had that problem. So yeah, I have to see.
Okay, so it has happened. Okay, that's
but it's
good.
not by design. It's not by design because the application has its own local storage, right? And when it's updated, it shouldn't be wiped out. So yeah, we'll check that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
But again, a reminder, we are in beta. So we've got a few of these things that we need to fix. We're working on it. But definitely continue to submit any bugs or even just UI UX fixes that you think we ought to implement to us. We love everybody's feedback. Aneil is particularly a very vocal supplier of feedback, which is really invaluable for both our design and dev teams.
Thanks, Aneil.
Let's see. Well, since you mentioned this one earlier, Milad, why don't we tackle this question? Is Breaker using or planning to use IPFS for file distribution?
Yeah, no, and this is a decision we took in 2016 before starting. The reason is that we went for a personalized encryption on each user's disk. So, for example, I'm the first one who has the file, right? And I want to, and I'm giving it, I'm sending it to Aneil. What happens in our scheme is that there's a handshake between our nodes at the beginning. A symmetric key is selected, and all the chunks that are sent to Aneil are encrypted with that key. And then Aneil's node will encrypt the decrypted files after he gets them with a key derived from his private key. So it's very personal. And then that is stored on his disk, right? With IPFS, there's only one version of the file we can, as far as I know. Maybe that has changed over the 2 years. But in the past, when we started this in 2016, that was the case. So only one version of the file can be stored on IPFS. And that would mean the artist needs to encrypt the file with only one key, store it there, and then the first person that buys that file gets that encryption key. And then it can be shared with everyone on the planet very easily, you know? It's not that it's impossible to break DRMs, but that way, just after one guy gets the key, the IPFS file is always there, so anyone can download it and with that key access it. That's the reason. That's the main reason. I mean, with Filecoin, it may be different. So in the future, we may change our storage engine and distribution engine. We're not married to these things. That's not the whole point of Breaker. But for now, what we have is the best thing we've seen.
And so you also touched upon that issue of DRM, which I think is something that's super fascinating. It's something that we haven't really talked about in a big public way before, but we've actually created our own DRM, digital rights management solution, for the purposes of the Breaker app. I think Milad's done a good job of outlining how it works there. Adam, could you maybe describe for people who aren't as familiar with DRM what's normal for industry standard DRM in entertainment, and then what have we done that's different and why?
Sure. So industry standard in the entertainment industry for DRM is that each file is encrypted with a single key. Much like Milad was just saying, that's the problem with IPFS, similar. And what happens is when a user gets it, there's an authentication process by which the selling platform says this person now is authorized to play this one. That sends them the certificate to allow them to actually decrypt and play the file. But that's the same encryption for that piece of content, regardless of the user. It's just controlled via a centralized system. So what we've done, and I think what Milad and team have done, which is really an innovative step in the industry, is, as he said, it personalizes the encryption. So there's any file or piece of file throughout the BitTorrent network is encrypted with a derived key from the private key of the node that it sits on, whether it's even if it's an intermediary node, if there was such a thing in the network, that would be encrypted there. So no file could be retrieved from there and then played back. Can't be decrypted with anything but the private key of that particular node, whether it be a user or seeder or any other part of the network. This is really innovative, and I think it's not like public-private key encryption hasn't been around forever, but what's different is that as to be part of the Breaker network, you have to have a public and a private key, which that's what makes it different, right? In the past, individual users wouldn't have to have one, so therefore, how would you make that scheme work? So what we've done is create a very personalized, individualized encryption that makes it extremely difficult to break and share files in the system, but doesn't require any kind of centralized authority to actually work. So that's a true decentralized encryption scheme, which is at this point is unique to Breaker's network.
Yeah, and to add to that, one of the steps is that when a node is asked for a file, when someone asks for a file, that node during the handshake checks if that person, if that private key holder actually purchased and has access to the file. Right now, because we have a hybrid system, it checks with our servers, but in the future it will check on the chain and see if that public key has access to the file. So that makes it completely centralized, and there's no central authentication server. But yeah, that's in the future when we go completely decentralized.
It's a pretty radical change in the industry. We're actually beginning, now that we've got it complete, we're actually beginning to socialize that within the industry and get some feedback on how they feel about that as compared to the existing systems. And already, just in some rather casual conversations, gotten some great feedback on
it. Can I ask that question, a single question on DRM? So do you have hierarchies of digital rights within a particular content? For example, I'm thinking music. So you could have, for example, a mixer who can take that music, mix it into his music and sell it. Or you could have just a listener who just wants to listen. And one person might be making profits out of it, whereas the other is just listening, right? So then for the second person who wants to make profit out of this, is there a way to kind of create this hierarchy in the rights management so they pay more or something like this?
Yeah, so what you're describing is licensing, the way Ujo does it. Ujo is very close to us. It's like our sister project. So we work with them. We will work with them in the future about that. But for our platform, there are DRM-free content. And the difference is that you will have an export button that you can just decrypt the files and put it on a USB drive or whatever, and take it with you. But what you're describing is a licensing scheme, that is different for someone that buys the content versus someone that wants to use it in a creative project. So yeah, we will have that kind of thing in the future, working with Ujo, of course.
I want to add to that a little bit in that, as with much of what happens on Breaker, it's optional for an artist to choose how they want to sell their content or distribute their content. So they can choose to make it DRM free, they can choose to add DRM, and in the future they'll be able to choose exactly which scheme they want for their music. So some music may or may not be available for mixers, but it will be entirely up to the content owner.
Yep.
Thanks.
Great. So I guess back to some questions that we have about the app in particular. We've gotten this question a few times via Discord, so I think it's attributable to maybe a few different people. But why don't we have a Linux version available of the app, for example?
Yeah, I mean, we ourselves are heavy Linux users. We have a lot of programmers in the team that use Linux. But it wasn't a high priority for the launch. We needed the Mac and Windows version to work as good as possible. But it's in the roadmap. We will have it probably soon. I can't promise when, but we are working on it. But yeah, we love Linux, so yeah.
I think it's probably fair to say that definitely people really steeped in blockchain, like yourself, Milad, and the rest of Digital Mob, love Linux. But I would hazard a guess that the average artist and entertainment consumer is probably not as Linux savvy as you guys are.
Yeah, possibly. I don't have the numbers, but yeah, that's probably.
No, I don't know if, so for anybody who's watching on YouTube in the future, I don't know that you'll be able to read the comment, but Miguel has just typed Snarfi's girlfriend has Linux, ? And I think that's a good summation, kind of in a meme sort of way of what we mean by it not being a priority.
Right. If I may for a second, I'm a fan of Linux, but kind of like our unofficial avatar for Breaker has become Snarfi's girlfriend. And I believe Carrie, I don't want to quote or put words on her mouth, but I believe that Carrie will be with me on this. Like Snarfi's girlfriend is kind of like the avatar for Breaker. Snarfi's girlfriend stands for all of those people that have the Spotify, the YouTube, the Netflix, and Hulu. And all they care is for a Windows computer or a Mac or an Android phone or an iPhone. So Linux has their own thing. A lot of people from the Ethereum and the blockchain community use Linux. I use Linux, but I don't want to say it's not a priority, but obviously we want to tackle first the Snarfi's girlfriend's demographic.
I like that we're really running with this Snarfi. Oh, go ahead, Adam.
I was going to say specifically, we are working very hard on our mobile app, so that's sort of our main focus right now.
Well, actually, why don't we pose a question about that then? So, do we have a time frame yet for making the Breaker app available via mobile, OTT, other versions like that? What does that roadmap look like?
Wow. Well, can't make any main promises, but our goal is to have the mobile apps out this year. So that's a little on the vague side, but we are definitely gunning for this year. And then I think the next step will be rolling out the OTT. So it may see some this year, or it may bleed into 2020.
Cool.
That's a good answer.
I think that's probably all we can say at this point, but definitely know all Snarfi's girlfriends out there
we are working on
this very much a priority.
I think it's almost safe to say it's our #1 priority right now. Mobile release. Yeah.
Mobile OTT and improving the desktop app is on the list.
Yeah, can I ask a quick question? I think maybe related to some of the timelines that you put in, Adam. So is Adam and Milad, are you both in Europe or no? I know Milad, you in future,
I'm in the US.
Yeah.
In the US. So I think the question I wanted to ask was maybe Milad and Adam both. I'm not sure what part of technical involvement you guys are in, but how is your team? Yeah, how is your team? How has it grown in the last, say, 24 months? And how do you see this, DevOps team growing and contributing specifically to the Breaker-related dApps and apps and all of that?
Yeah. So the tech team, of course, it has grown a lot. We have in Consensus Romania, we have, I guess, around 60 people, right? But not all of them are working on Breaker. But for example, our DevOps team, who are five people, work on a lot of our projects, but mostly they focus on Breaker, for example, when it's going to launch, when they want to prepare for it and stuff like that. So yeah, Consensus Romania is about 60 people. Yeah.
We have a small team we're just really putting together in the last few months in New York. That's also working on some of the applications, mostly web-based work. But yeah, so we're actually beginning to sort of build out a little bit more development in the US. Up till now, it's been 100% in Romania. Now we're just adding a little bit of work here in New York City.
Yeah, and I think your team, Adam, has actually probably seen the most growth of any department in Breaker over the past 6 months or so. Maybe branding as well, but
yeah, arguably. I mean, I think the biggest team we probably have as a individual team would be Milad's group, who work on the actual, the main dev of the applications and the and all of our underlying processing, back-end processing. That's mostly Milad's team. But yeah, we now have a nice little team that's coming together well in New York.
Can you talk a little bit, Adam, about the focus of your team and how you're supplementing the dev efforts by Milad and the rest of Consensus Romania?
Sure. I think mostly what our team is focused on are, for the most part, is artist-facing type development. So we're working on, I think our probably biggest contribution that'll come out in the near future is some robust data analysis and data dashboards for the artists to see both financial and activity type data on what's going on with their content on Breaker. So that'll include charts, graphs, maps, all kinds of different types of breakdown of data so that artists can make good, smart business decisions going forward, whether they want to release in an area they haven't seen a lot of activity in, whether they want to focus on a certain type of content that seems more popular than other types of content. From a music perspective, you might be able to sort of do concerts in certain areas where you see that your music is most popularly downloaded or streamed. So there's a whole host of information that we're going to be offering up as part of the artist experience and that's coming out of our team in a robust way. We're also working on some of the more sort of batch upload for content, things like that too. But it's kind of content owner, artist facing type work.
Cool. And on that note, we did get a question about sort of the artist portal side of things. So will there be a way to integrate the artists who sell their content in Breaker digitally along with something more analog, for example, buy the album in Breaker and get the vinyl press, kind of like what services like Bandcamp do for musicians already?
Yeah, the way we see that is that we're really trying to build my team is trying to build out a very robust suite of artist services. So, for example, you might want to order a subtitle for your content because if we're disintermediating aggregators, distributors, and studios from the process, well, they do add value. You may pay too much for that value, but they do add value, and so we want to add that back in. So one of the things is outputting your content to a variety of different things. So whether it be a DVD for video or vinyl for music, or publishing it potentially to another platform other than Breaker, we want to make sure that an artist has a robust suite of services. So what we're doing now is we're beginning to partner up with a variety of different service providers so that we can actually make that into a very, very simple, streamlined experience for the artist via the artist portal. This could change, but we're sort of envisioning kind of a shopping cart type experience where you could literally just select, I want to buy a subtitle for this piece of content in French, and you add it to your cart, you pay, and then a week later, it's now available within your content management area. So that's the kind of thing we're working on, and for sure, outputs to physical is part of it.
So bringing together a whole network of individuals who can provide the same sort of services and experiences that you would normally get if you went through a centralized gatekeeper like a film studio or a record label. That's
right, but at hopefully a fraction of the cost to the user, so that they're not getting all the overhead that goes with those things won't be part of it. Pretty much, we're doing this stuff at cost, so there's no real profit in it for Breaker. It's really just a service to the artist community.
Great. I think we've covered sort of, at least in broad strokes, a lot of the types of questions that we've been asked. And we are getting near the 40-minute mark of our conversation here. So I know there's only a few members of the community on this call. Is there anything that you guys haven't had a chance to ask yet, specifically about the technology? Let's open it up to questions from the public.
Yeah, I'm, G, so very confident with our technical team, Adam and Milad. I think you guys have done a pretty enormous job, right, in bringing us to where we are. I guess maybe not so much in this session, but in future sessions, perhaps the key is going to be tokenomics, right? That's really going to be the moment for us to shine, and the blockchain and everything that it's all about. So just something that I've been very mindful about in the recent weeks. So perhaps a topic for discussion at another time, but I kind of wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, we have been working on a lot of new things. We won't be able to talk about it now, but you will see the result probably soon. I think Zach mentioned that too, right? A few times.
Right. As Zach has shared in the past, we are working on a new white paper. It's something that a number of individuals are, including Milad, pretty heavily involved in, sort of figuring out how to further gamify and decentralize what we've built to date. We have anything that we're ready to share at this point, but we're getting closer to being able to do that. And I think we ought to save tokenomics for another conversation, just because I'm pretty confident it could take up an entire hour by itself, not just the last few minutes.
It's going to be great. I know. You'll love it.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Cool. Any other questions?
I think if I may, Milad, we may have had an exchange in this in the past, and it's the spirit of letting other innovators in the dApp space innovate and contribute to the Breaker economy, right? I could imagine so many different kinds of apps that one can create that utilizes what it is that we're creating. So do you think that this thought is in alignment with your vision in a sense that, we want to promote other developers to create apps that supports Breaker economy? What do you think? Kind of like by an SDK type mechanism. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's in the vision. For sure. That's what I'm saying. You're going to love it. Wait for it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Anything else? Crickets. I guess one other question that we did get that I wanted to make sure we answered here was about Toket, and what are the plans to revamp Toket. And so I just wanted to reiterate something that we've said on previous calls that and sort of ties in to implicitly to what's been discussed thus far on this call, that there isn't really this plan to revamp Toket into this big sort of crowdfunding portal again. It's simply not a priority, like Milad shared about the Linux version of the app. It's not something that we're saying we're never going to do. It's just that Toket's function right now is primarily as a tokenization engine. It's something that's being employed in the Breaker dApp. The Breaker dApp would not have been possible without this framework that was developed via Toket. And it's something that artists are using every day in order to tokenize and get their content on the Breaker portal.
Yeah. Gee, if I may, I think I just thought of one more question. So on the Breaker feedback, there are lots and lots of feedbacks. Sometimes they're really tiny, and then sometimes they're bigger feedbacks. So questions are two. So one, is someone very actively creating like a table, a list of all the things that are coming from the Breaker feedback and also externally, and having this online, like active discussions? Is there a way that maybe we could create a feedback loop saying, okay, hey, we heard you, we did this. So between every push on your upgrades, you can at least say, these are all the updates that happen. So this way the community feels very part of this DevOps. What do you think?
I think that's a good note. And I'm also happy to share here sort of what that workflow looks like for us. First of all, yes, that there are people diligently documenting all of the comments, regardless of whether it's a critical bug or just sort of a suggestion for a UI design in the future. It's all being documented. It's being maintained by myself, Miguel, who's on this call, and a couple of the other Breaker team members who are in Discord on a regular basis. We're all updating this. Then that list gets shared with the project manager, who's reviewing it and then deciding what's being prioritized, what can we push out right away, what's something that's going to need to be added to our list of to-dos but get pushed a little bit further down the line. And then that gets discussed with Milad's team, Digital Mob, in order to figure out how to logistically implement it. I think it's a good note that you've pointed out here, though, and we certainly could explore some more solutions to remind people when and how we're implementing the types of things that have been suggested by our users.
Right. It just creates a very nice feedback loop, and it says, hey, I made an opinion, and hey, look, they heard me, they made an update, and what a wonderful way to kind of close that loop, right? So just a thought.
Yeah, definitely. I'm hoping we'll have some news to share about like very specific pointed feedback that was shared in Discord, then led to a lot of huddles internally, and then culminated into an interesting change in the app. Going live relatively soon, so we'll be able to talk about it more then, and maybe use that as a case study for how we might handle these types of communication in the future.
Yep.
Somehow a piano has materialized near me now. So if there's some delicate music wafting in the background, know that it's South by Southwest, and what can you do? But I think I might casually slide this way to avoid some of the noise. But
I think that's the cue.
Well, I know we've got a few more minutes, and I think something that we've only touched upon very briefly and would be interesting to hear from you more in detail, Adam. We've been focused very much in this conversation about the sort of the average user experience, what it looks like for an entertainment consumer coming on board this platform. Could you talk to us a little bit more about artists using tokens for rights, royalty, and revenue management, so that our community understands how artists are using and interacting with this technology?
Sure. I think we mentioned this, and it's the sort of the main function of Token really these days, is that the way that we work the system and how artists get paid and how revenue and rights are managed is via tokens. So you can mint tokens using Token, you assign those tokens to content, and then revenue is pushed on a fractional share to anybody who holds those tokens. So that makes it very easy to manage rights. So for example, if a few of us made a movie together and we each held 25% rights in the movie, we could make 100 tokens. We could each hold 25 tokens, and therefore anytime a transaction happened on Breaker, 25% of that revenue would be available to each of the token holders. What makes rights so valuable with that, and what makes that so valuable for rights management, I should say, is that if I then wanted to give 10 of my tokens to somebody else, therefore 10% of the rights to the entire project, all I need to do is give 10 tokens. I don't need to run through any contracts. There's no delays. There's no fees. It's just here's 10 tokens, and now from all future revenue, they have a right to 10% of the future revenue. And there's the other side of that. So that's we call a content token. It's just an ERC20 token with a fractional share. But the other way we can do this is you can tokenize a person. So I think the best example for that is with respect to music. So if you have a musician who's written 3 songs, each with a different songwriter, each owns 50%. So the musician owns 50% of each song, and the songwriters each own 50% of one song. Well, you could create a token for the person, each person of the 4 people in the example. You could then push 50% of the revenue to the musician's token for each of the songs and to each of the songwriters for the other songs. So that makes it so another way of managing your revenue, and obviously rights, if, for example, you didn't just make a single token, but of your tokens you had 100, you could even give someone a permanent share of your revenue stream down the line. Let's say you have a child and you want to let them have 20% of your revenue going forward, you give them 20% of Atom tokens. And now from now on, any revenue assigned to Atom tokens gets sent to that, or available, has to be pulled out of the smart contract to that person. So I think that in the combination of those 2 types of tokens can make a very, very powerful and way of managing rights, royalties, and revenue without incurring lots and lots of fees or legal agreements or anything else. And I see it as an extremely powerful part of the system and attractive to artists going forward. I hope that makes sense. It's easier to do with diagrams.
So to that point, Adam, that you made, maybe pointed to G, has the legal landscape caught up to try to implement that vision that Adam just pointed out?
Yes and no. I think because we have such a nuanced, specific, interesting use case for tokenization, there really hasn't a need for anyone to weigh in legally. Certainly using technology in order to get artists royalty and residual payments, that's nothing new. So what we're doing would not necessarily need a lawyer or a regulator to opine on until you start doing things like the public crowdfunding. So that's another reason why Tokit as a public crowdfunding engine is a little bit further out for us, because we need to work more with the regulators and our legal team abroad in order to figure out the most responsible way to implement that.
And I don't think, since these tokens are not going to be listed on exchanges, that's also a reason why we really don't have to worry about the regulatory environment at this point. These are strictly for your own personal use.
Got it.
Great. Did we have any additional questions for the team today?
May I ask something which is not so technical? Maybe I don't know if it's for Adam or for Milad. I hope you can hear me. I am not so sure if the app that we have now can be updated regularly, or it need to be updated for a new version. For example, many of the feedbacks that we have in the Discord are very small things, very looks from me, which I'm not a developer or IT person. Looks like could be done very fast for somebody who has the skills. I don't know if it's possible that the app could be updated regularly with small issues, or is necessary to be updated with a new version when many of the issues are.
Yeah, I think we lost you at the end, but for each update, a new version has to be released, right? Because it's not a web application, it's a downloadable application. It has to do with keys and stuff like that. So you have to do an update to the application. And we do, I think, at least weekly updates the app now. I mean, just today we released a new version. And I don't know about all the modifications you're talking about in Discord, but as they get to us, we prioritize them and implement them. And usually once a week or once every 2 weeks, we do a big update that includes many changes. Yeah. If there are big bugs, we usually do a hotfix release. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think this was important. Maybe I'm appealing to Thomas. For some people who are not technical like me, probably it's good to have the communication about that, showing that your feedback was positive, and then I think create more engagement and looks like we listen to each other.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Hey, also, I remember one more question. It looks like I never run out of questions. G and I had a little exchange on algorithms, right? So like right now, there are quite a few people who already created their channels, and it's the UI accessibility of those channels a little bit difficult. So moving forward, I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to try to create algorithms to try to display content for the users. It just seems like the way everything is laid out right now, I had to go to view all to try to see what all the channels are that are there, and then kind of click through each one. It's just, I think there's some areas to do some user studies to try to figure out what works for people. I don't know. Do you want to chime in on that? And and maybe also use like some kind of an algorithm AI or some kind of a not an intensive AI, but like a minimally viable AI to try to predict what it is that the user might want to see, so that the whole thing just becomes decentralized from the get-go. So the content just gets presented in that fashion. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Adam, I know that you've done at least a lot of conceptual and research work as it pertains to platforms, curation, algorithms used to do that. Is there anything that you're able to share at this time with us?
All I can say is it's on our roadmap. We definitely are concerned about discovery. We think it's a general problem in the industry. I mean, even if you look at some of the other platforms, it's extremely difficult sometimes to find. There have been some interesting studies about how long it takes to find something to watch on various platforms. I'm not going to name names, but bottom line is it's a general problem in the industry. And so we are very concerned about it. We are working on some solutions for it. Part of it will be in this next iteration that Milad has been hinting about. But there are some other things that we are in fact working on. And so it's a concern. It's definitely on our roadmap to deal with. I think, we are trying to solve some of these other problems first, but it's definitely there. I just want to, sorry, looking at the chat, we definitely got some interesting stuff in there. I did want to answer one of the questions from EOS Phoenix Smith at the top of the chat. We have an entire content team. G, in fact, is at South by Southwest, who are looking to onboard more artists, and we have a couple of big plays for content for getting more consumers on board the platform. A lot of it we feel it revolves around our mobile release. So I think we'll be pushing a lot more to more marketing and more effort to get more consumers on the platform when we're ready to release our mobile app. Some of the other questions may be answered better by Milad.
I think we're coming to the end of our time here, and I believe Milad has answered these in sort of some form earlier in the conversation. Things like SDK and further decentralization of the platform. So I am going to do my utmost to get this video up on YouTube so that EOS Phoenix Smith can watch and can get answers to his questions. There's quite a bit of folks starting to crowd around me here at South by because I believe I'm actually right next to the auditorium where Joe Lubin, our own beloved Joe, is going to be giving an interactive keynote in just half an hour or so. So I think we're going to have to end it just a couple of minutes early today. I certainly want to participate in this next panel. But thank you, everybody, for submitting your questions. Thank you very much to Milad and Adam for joining us today. I know you guys are super busy, but I think this has been a very informative conversation. This is going to be a shame, actually, that the chat is not available on the YouTube video. So
I see us laughing at nothing.
But I guess it's just a reminder to everybody in the community, you really got to join these things live. It's real entertaining when you do so. But
we can make it available.
Thanks again, everybody. And I'll let everybody know in Discord and on Reddit when we're scheduling the next one of these things. Let us know what topics you feel like we haven't covered today or want to cover more in the future.
Thanks, everyone. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.